Well, we all know that one of the things Ireland is most associated with, particularly among tourists, is the Irish pub. But new figures out this morning show over 2,000 public houses have closed down since 2005. The stats are from the Drinks Industry Group of Ireland. Economist and Associate Professor Emeritus at DCU, Anthony Foley, has been analysing the findings. He joins me now. Good morning to you, Tony. 2,054 fewer pubs now than in 2005. Not great for a country that's associated with the Irish pub and the Irish land of a thousand welcomes.
No, although we could put the slightly optimistic spin on it and say there's still almost 6,600, because that 2,000 decline is from 8,600 in 2005 to the just under 6,600 at present. So yes, it's a serious loss in terms of not only an economic infrastructure for small villages and local rural areas, but it's also a loss in terms of the social impact that they would have as gathering places, meeting places. It's a continuing decline over that period. Now, there have been some particularly bad years. You won't be surprised to hear that in terms of years with over 200 losses in a particular year were 2008, 9 and 10, the Troika austerity period. And then 2020 was also over 200, the immediate effect of the COVID situation. The rest of the time, it's been a good period from 2015 to 19, where there was only an annual loss of 11. But in more recent years, 2019 to 23, back up over 100. So spread over that long period. And of course, primarily non-Dublin pubs, that over the same period, Dublin had a small decline of 22.3%, whereas the rest of the country lost the 2032, which was a 25%
Right.
reduction.
But just to do the back of the envelope maths on it there, so over the last 18 years, it's averaging 114 pubs closing every year. So to be even more basic than that, we can say two pubs a week in Ireland close down.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Two pubs a week in Ireland closed down over that entire 18-year period. And of course, particular counties are more
Yeah,
affected
I
than
wanted to
others.
ask you about that. You mentioned there Dublin versus outside Dublin. Are there counties where more pubs are closing? Is it rural areas where more close down?
Yeah, it's more the West and the Midlands, and the East has the lower decline. The highest decline in this report over the up to 2023 period was Limerick with 35.6%. So almost 4 in 10 pubs in Limerick declined over the period, or disappeared over the period. Roscommon is second, 31.9%. And then comes several counties which are just above 30% or at 30%: Cork, Tipperary, Laois, Clare, Westmeath. And then following them around 25%, Mayo, Offaly, Leitrim, Longford, Donegal. And at the other end of the scale,
Mm.
you've got Dublin, as we said, with a 2.8% decline, Meath 6.7, Wicklow 8.9, and everyone in between above 10%.
But those
So the east of
counties,
the country,
but those counties would also be where it would be more expensive to do business.
Uh, it would be in some cases, but there's also the other economic factors that you've got in the east: massive growth in population, younger population, more concentrated population, and maybe starting off a smaller penetration of pubs per bundle of population than would have been the case in the rest of the country, because obviously that concentration of pubs reflects a pattern reflecting population many days gone, as it were. So you go back to the 1900s, the population would have been more focused on the western part of the country. It would have been more focused in rural areas. And then as those populations change, we get this, as it were, large number of pubs which can survive in particular areas.
Mm.
And
The,
one thing about that particular period, we might think of it as, sure, that's no great surprise. We'd lose so many businesses because that was COVID,
yeah.
Troika, austerity period, and so on. But also over that full period, the economy performed very well. So, for example, employment increased by 36% over the same period. The volume of household expenditure increased by 45%. Population went up by 28%. But over that whole period, the total alcohol volume that we consumed declined by 4%. And average alcohol consumption declined by 26%. So the alcohol market in total has performed much worse than the
Yeah.
overall economy over that
Okay.
period.
Maybe because people don't want to drink as much.
Oh, absolutely. There's a number of reasons why things have happened. And as I say, average consumption has dropped by 26% over that period. And one of the things that would affect the number of pubs declining would be precisely, as you would say, market changes. That people have expectations. They have different consumer expectations. They might want better quality pubs than a small rural pub which simply provides alcohol. Maybe they're looking for food, looking for entertainment, so looking for the kind of services that the bigger pubs in larger urban areas would be able to provide.
Yeah.
So consumers have changed their attitude, even what they drink. So if you want a selection of craft beers, it's going to be very difficult for a small rural pub to provide the required spread on a commercial basis, but obviously a larger town pub or urban pub would be able to meet those different consumer
Right.
expectations. And
Um,
of course, as well, we've got the regulation change that drinking and driving is frowned upon. It wouldn't have been as frowned upon in the past. So all of that had
yeah.
an impact on
The
demand for the pubs.
the fact that we have 2,000 pubs closing down over the last 20 years, is that crisis or is that leveling out? Because I can think of some rural towns where every second business was a pub, and maybe this is
Yeah.
just a bit of normality and leveling out the market.
Yes, it would be. Now, again, we have to decide what's the market. Do we leave everything to the market? So, as we've already mentioned, the market changes in terms of its expectations, the numbers of people, and so on, what they're looking for. So, yes, there would be an element of leveling out, but it would also be a case where do we, as it were, continue that over the next 20 years? Would there be another 2,000 pubs gone or 1,000 or whatever, and then the impact of that? As you're probably aware, the government has a number of schemes to try and offset that from a social perspective. So there's one scheme which supports pubs in rural areas to reinvent themselves in terms of community facilities, that they provide facilities for book clubs, sports clubs, and so on. So there's also the social impact but from a commercial point of view, just baldly looking at the market, yes, that decline reflects market
Right.
circumstances
Okay.
and, in
So
your terminology, coming more into line with market
yes.
circumstances.
Okay. I'm way over time. Can I just ask you very briefly? Would a VAT cut help those 2,000 pubs that are shutting down, or would they have closed anyway?
A VAT cut in terms of food services would help them, but a lot of these pubs would not be extensive food companies. They'd be primarily alcohol based.
Okay.
So an excise reduction would be more useful to them
Right.
in terms of the preponderance in alcohol serving. But some of those pubs, yes, would have been also providing food, and any reduction in tax improves the commercial viability of enterprises. Because remember, these taxes are basically taking a chunk of money that the customer gives to the pub, and the government then takes it, so it doesn't go to the entrepreneur or the enterprise.
All right. Okay.
So
I'm way
any
over
reduction.
time. Tony, thank you very much for joining us. Economist and Associate Professor Emeritus at DCU, Anthony Foley. Now it's 6:26. Let's take your traffic.